Welcome back to Mostly Mysteries. Today we will be exploring the tragic events surrounding the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders. In the serene wilderness of Mays County, a senseless crime shattered the peace of a once happy and bustling Girl Scout camp, leaving a community in mourning and a nation in shock. Join us as we delve into the heart-wrenching story, seeking answers and honoring the memories of the young lives lost in this unforgettable tragedy. Lori Lee Farmer, Michelle Heather Goose, and Doris Denise Milner didn't know each other when they were put into the same tent on the first day of Girl Scout camp in Oklahoma in the summer of 1977, but their names will be forever linked, victims of one of the most horrific killings in Oklahoma's history. At 8, Lori was the youngest girl at Camp Scott in Locust Grove, but she was unusually mature, the oldest of 5 girls in her family. Shy Michelle was 9 years old and had asked her mom to look after her plants while she was away. Denise, as she preferred to be called, was a 10-year-old straight-A student who was planning to attend camp with her friends. When they pulled out at the last minute, Denise wanted to pull out too, but her mom persuaded her to go on her own. On the first day of camp, it poured with rain, and the girls were sent to their tents to write letters home. Lori talked about how much fun she was having. "I've met 2 new friends, Michelle Goose and Denise Milner," she wrote to her parents. Denise was less enthusiastic. "I don't like camp," she wrote to her mom. "It's awful. I don't want to stay in camp for 2 weeks. I want to come home." The 3 girls were in tent 8, the furthest away from the counselor's tent. Being the first night at camp, there was a lot of excitement, and counselors Carla Wilhite and Dee Elder had to get up a couple of times during the night to ask giggling girls to quieten down and go to sleep. But it wasn't just the sound of giggling that the counselors heard. They heard a low, guttural sound, something in between a growl or a moan, coming from the woods. Carla, who was 18 years old and on her first night as a counselor, thought it must be an animal. As she walked towards the sound, it stopped. When she walked away, it started again. She was too frightened to investigate further.
I didn't want anything to pounce out of the woods at me. Whatever it was, I didn't want to tangle with it.
At 6 a.m., Carla got up to have an early shower. She saw 3 sleeping bags on the ground outside. The bodies of Lori, Michelle, and Denise were underneath them. The girls had been essayed, bound with duct tape and unalived. Lori and Michelle had been beaten severely and Denise had been affiliated. All the other Girl Scouts were quickly put on a bus and sent back to their parents. Police began their investigation. The girls' tent was damaged and there was blood on the floor and mattresses with one obvious shoe print. Near the bodies, police found rope, a pair of women's glasses, and a torch with newspaper shoved inside. In a nearby cave, there was some of the same duct tape found on the girls' bodies, pages from the same newspaper found inside the torch, black and white photos of 3 women at a formal event, and writing on the wall, "The killer was here. Bye-bye, fools." The black and white photos were soon identified as having been taken at the wedding of the daughter of an employee of the Granite Reformatory, a jail in Oklahoma.
The photographer's assistant at the wedding, who had printed those photos, was a Granite Reformatory inmate called Jean Leroy Hart.
Hart quickly became the prime suspect in the Girl Scout killings. He was a former high school sports star who had turned to crime in his early 20s.
In 1966, he was charged with kidnapping 2 pregnant teenagers. He pleaded guilty and was sent to jail, but paroled after just a few months. After committing a string of burglaries, he was known for stealing glasses because he had bad eyesight. He ended up back in court.
Because he'd committed the burglaries while on parole, he was sentenced to more than 300 years jail. He escaped in 1973.
10 months after the Girl Scout murders, following the biggest manhunt in Oklahoma history, Hart was finally captured and charged. A member of the Cherokee Nation, Hart had a huge number of supporters in the local community who were convinced of his innocence. They held a fundraiser to help with legal fees.
The police case was not as strong as they had hoped it would be. The shoe print found inside the girls' tent wasn't the same size as Hart's foot, and although the police claimed a fingerprint had been found on one of the girls' bodies, it turned out to belong to a police officer.
A jury found Hart not guilty, but he still had his 300-year-plus sentence to serve, so he was sent back to jail. He died 2 months later, after having a heart attack while exercising.
So if Hart didn't kill Lori, Michelle, and Denise, who did? 2 months before the murders, a note was left inside an empty donut box at the campsite. "We are on a mission to kill 3 girls in Tent 1, the note read. But it also contained statements about Martians. It wasn't taken seriously at the time or even after the murders. District Attorney Sid Wise told the New York Times in 1978 the note was probably a prank. Over the years, police have investigated and eliminated numerous other suspects. DNA testing carried out in the 1980s allowed police to rule out several men as being the killer, but not Hart. The results of further DNA testing, released in May this year, pointed even more strongly to Hart's guilt. Our belief is that Jean Leroy Hart committed the murders. Andrea Fielding, the director of Forensic Science Services at the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation, told Coco 5 News in May.
"I've been convinced of Hart's guilt ever since sitting through his trial. I've only visited my daughter's grave once, preferring not to think of her in the ground. I see Denise in one of my granddaughters, Morgan. She has the same personality. She wants to be a part of everything. She tries to join everything like Denise did."
I am at peace, but that doesn't mean closure. When I sit down for my birthday with my daughters, you'll see me laughing. And yet, I am aware we're not all there. And that's still real.
As for Carla, the camp counselor who discovered the girls' bodies, she felt the need to help somebody afterwards, and became a police officer, then an occupational therapist. She has never met any of the parents of the 3 girls. She says she can't face them because she's always felt guilty about that night. In conclusion, the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders is that the case remains unsolved. Despite extensive investigations, including DNA analysis and potential suspects, no one has been definitively linked to the crime. The tragic event continues to be a haunting and unresolved chapter in the history of both the Girl Scouts organization and the state of Oklahoma. Our thoughts remain with the victims and their families as they seek closure and justice for this heinous crime. The Oklahoma Girl Scout murders serve as a reminder of the vulnerability of innocent individuals and the lasting impact of senseless violence on communities. The tragic loss of 3 young lives at a peaceful campsite shocked the nation and highlighted the importance of safety and security measures, especially in youth organizations. As we reflect on this heartbreaking incident, we must also recognize the resilience and strength of the Girl Scouts community, which has continued to support and empower girls despite the tragedy. The memory of Lori, Michelle, and Doris lives on as a symbol of innocence lost but not forgotten, inspiring efforts to prevent similar tragedies and ensure a safer world for future generations. May the memory of the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders remind us of the importance of justice, compassion, and vigilance in protecting the most vulnerable among us. Let us honor the victims by striving for a society where such senseless acts of violence have no place, and where all children can grow up in safety and peace. Thank you guys for tuning in and sticking around until the end of our video. If this is the kind of content you enjoy, go ahead and tap that subscribe button with notifications on so you never miss a new video. Also hit that like button to help us get into the algorithm. Well, that's all we have today, guys. Until next time, be safe, be kind, and we hope to see you next week.